Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to Ground Floor Academy video series featuring real estate investors from everyday life. Today, we're going to be talking with Paul MacInnis from Windsor, Nova Scotia, to kind of get an idea of his story and how he got into real estate, what type of investment properties he owns, and kind of some of the different challenges and items that he's encountered during his career within the real estate world. My name is Tony LeBlanc. I'm the founder and CEO of Ground Floor Property Management, as well as the Ground Floor Academy. The reason why I put together this video series is very basic. I'm looking to put out some content out in the marketplace for whether if it's new real estate investors or seasoned investors to hear stories of other investors that have, been in different places that some investors are looking to go in. And really just a place to learn and to hear stories and a place to share stories and discuss things about the world of real estate, primarily focusing on multi-units, whether if it's residential or commercial, but most of the focus will be put on the residential side of things. It's kind of what I specialize in, and it's probably going to be what the specialty is for a lot of our different guests. So without further ado, I'm going to let Paul introduce himself and kind of give a quick introduction into himself. Hey, Paul.
Hi, Tony. Cheers. Thanks a lot for having me. I'm excited to chat with you a little bit today.
Absolutely.
So, like you said, obviously this is a show about real estate investing. I am a real estate investor. However, my full-time job is I'm a high school biology teacher. In fact, I'm actually sitting in my classroom right now with the white screen whiteboard behind me. But I've been in real estate for almost 11 years. I live in Windsor, Nova Scotia, and most of my properties are actually here in Windsor, and one property a little bit further away. But that's where I am. I'm married, 2 little kids, and just love talking about real estate, love talking about business. So I'm excited to do this.
Awesome. It's so funny that probably in the last couple of years when I've started reaching out to a lot more investors, as a day-to-day property managers, I deal with different types of clientele and dealing with my owners on a day-to-day basis. And I never get sick of talking shop with different guys, whether if it's property management, real estate, running numbers on buildings. And it's just something that, for me, it's just, it's exciting. And I always love the opportunity to kind of talk shop and go into details because there's not a lot of people that in the general public that know a lot about a lot of this stuff. So it's cool to connect with other people with similar likes, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Couldn't agree more.
Awesome. So how we're going to do it today is we're going to hear a little bit about Paul's story and kind of where he got started. As you kind of mentioned, he owns several different multi-units that are kind of locally to him. So we'll let Paul go through how he started his career, kind of how from the beginning, how it all worked, and we'll kind of go from there and ask some questions and see where we get.
Perfect. Yeah, so I'll happily start at the beginning of the real estate story. I work at a high school here, and I got the job when I was 23, I believe. And all of a sudden I went from earning $10 an hour at my previous job to having an actual salary and contributing to RRSPs and things I knew nothing about. So I felt very grown up. And basically, I decided I wanted to do something with my money. I wanted to put it to work for me. And I truly knew nothing about real estate, absolutely nothing. I hadn't read a book. I hadn't watched a video. But one of my colleagues that I work with, who I still work with, is a very good friend of mine. He was selling a 4-unit building here in town, 90-second drive from my house. And I said, you know what? I'll buy it from you. And yeah, it was a private sale. It was super smooth. It was super easy. There was no negotiation. It was a good deal. He wasn't trying to rip me off. And so boom, I got into it. I actually took advantage of the home buyers plan, where you can use a little bit of your RRSP money to get into a building. So I took advantage of that program.
Was this your first purchase even before you bought your own first residential house?
Yeah,
Oh,
yeah.
wow.
So I'm in a unique situation actually. I work at the school I work at is a boarding school, and so I actually live at the school, and technically, I suppose I'm a renter here. So,
Okay.
yeah, my wife and two kids. We have a great spot here on campus, and so my purchases have all been rental properties.
Nice. That's rare.
Yeah.
You rarely see, and actually, I was in your same shoes. I purchased my first triplex before I bought my first house.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah. As soon as I started working, same thing. As soon as I had a bit of cash, I was like, okay. I remember at my time, I was living in Toronto at the time, and my mother was in the property management business. I called her up. I'm like, go find me a building. I get a bit of money saved up. I
Right.
got to start doing this investing thing.
Yeah.
There's kind of no looking back since, right?
Exactly. Exactly.
So on a 4 unit, so previous to that discussion with your friend, had you been actively looking for different rentals, different properties, multi-unit, or?
Yeah, good question. You know what? No, I really wasn't. I honestly just had this sort of sort of niggling feeling that I should do something with my money. I was honestly, I was in a fortunate situation. I had very few bills. And I thought, you know what, I need to jump into this whole investing world. And despite the fact that I truly didn't know what I was doing, I did know that I did know that long term this was something that that made sense, and that if I wanted to reap the benefits years later, decades later, then why not start now? I was not I was not new to the concept of compound interest. I sort of understood that concept fairly well. And so I thought, you know what, get in now, start it now, and figure it out as you go.
Yeah. Awesome. So how old were you when you bought the first floor?
I just turned 25.
25. Wow.
Yeah.
That's definitely ahead of the norm, right? Especially with investments.
Yeah. Yeah. So the first property that I bought, it was a little bit rough. Certainly the tenants, were trying to intimidate me. I was 25 and looked 17.
Yeah. I was going to say, you still look young.
Thank you. So going down there for the first time to collect rent, and they were certainly trying to push me around a little bit, but over the years, obviously, as you know, you learn a lot just by doing and talking and communicating and building relationships, and I've kind of never looked back, to be honest.
Awesome. So it sounds like you didn't get stuck in the normal trap with I see this all the time, and you kind of read about it all in different blogs and all over the place, is this whole concept of analysis paralysis. So many people will sit on the sidelines. They will read real estate forums, real estate magazines till they're blue in the face, but they just never pull the trigger. For you, it sounds like the kind of opposite. You saw a deal, you kind of had an idea of, this is probably something, or I know I'm going to be in this at some point in time, and you kind of pulled the trigger.
Yep. Yeah. And, perhaps to my wife's chagrin sometimes, but that's that's kind of the way that I continue to operate.
Nice.
If I see something, let's pull the trigger, and then we'll figure it out. And for that very reason, Tony, the whole concept, I'm sure we're very similar in the books we read and excuse me, the literature that I like to consume. And it talks a lot about taking action in one way or another, whether it's, directly in real estate or just, making some positive change in your life. It's just do it now.
Yeah. Looking back, that year before, the years before you made that first purchase, do you remember, did you do any study in real estate? Did you any research? Were you an active kind of being educated in that industry in multi-units? Or?
No, in that industry, no, definitely not. It's my initial education in real estate came from the guy I bought the house from. His classroom backs onto mine, and so at the coffee machine we'd he'd tell me stories. I was going to say swap stories, but I suppose I didn't have any at the time. But he would, he'd tell me about the good, the bad, and the ugly. And something about it just intrigued me. Whether it was the potential growth, or whether it was the humanistic side of it, of just dealing with people in order to make money. I don't want to say burned, but I had a bad experience before that in the stock market. Sort of being tipped off to some great investment, and lost a bunch of money when I was 20 years old. So I wasn't too keen to jump back into the stock world. And so this real estate thing sounded pretty cool, and I just got in there and figured it out.
Awesome. Well, that's great. There's no better way than just jump in 2 feet, right? Just
exactly.
So how did you deal? So you bought the place, you now own it. It's been financed, all that fun stuff is done. Now there's a whole new side of it, which a lot of people, I find most of the education that I see and that I read out there is all about buying, kind of the rush of evaluating properties. I don't know about you, but me sitting down with a spreadsheet and evaluating a 24 unit building or a 12 unit building, like I could do that. I could do that all day, right?
Yeah, sure.
I love it. So there's like that initial rush of buying, and then it's like, okay, you pick up the keys, and it's like now you're a landlord. Whole different ball game. It becomes less sexy and a little bit less exciting for some. And the start for a lot of issues for a lot of people.
Absolutely.
So tell me a little bit about the processes, the systems that you hopefully had researched, or on how to take care of it, how to take care of the tenants, and how you were collecting your rents and dealing with all that, because it was all new to you, right?
Yeah, 100% new to me. Yeah, I got to be honest. It was overwhelming a little bit at the beginning, and what I relied on, and to be honest, I still do rely on, is just an ability to interact with people. Yeah. It's, for me, it's the understanding. It's the idea that you have to understand, I am the owner of people's homes. Yeah. This is where they live. This is where they come home to every day after their work day. Yeah. And, to understand that and to come at an issue knowing that makes a big difference. And I feel as though I've made a positive impact on most of my tenants over the years, simply because I am empathetic to the fact that it's their home. And, I've certainly made many mistakes as a landlord. There's no way you can't make mistakes in this business. They're just inevitable.
Yes, I agree.
Yeah, but I really try and keep the tenants' level of contentness way up there. I want them to be happy, because if they're happy, then by extension I'm going to be happy. And I have some pretty amazing tenants. In terms of what they have done for me and what they will do for me if I need to. Yeah, if I need them to.
And Paul, you bring up an amazing point. A few months ago, before the start of 2016, we had a big offsite meeting with me and myself and my staff, and I was presenting them with a lot of our new branding and a lot of our new messaging. And I can still remember being in front of them and reminding them, I'm like, you guys need to remember every day that you come to work that we provide over 1,500 homes for families. This is not... we go through our day-to-day, we do our paperwork, we answer the phones, and we do all this stuff, but exactly how you just pointed out, right? This is a business about people, and it's about, we're providing people with shelter, and they live, these are these people's homes. So you have no choice but to look at this from a kind of a different angle. It is a very special business, and it's a very touchy business. Where you're dealing with, again, it's their home. You got privacy issues. You don't want to impose, and you want to take care of maintenance items on a timely basis. All these different things, and I'll never forget kind of the reaction of my staff. And my staff have been with me for a long time, and everybody was like, kind of looking around, like, sometimes we forget that, right?
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
You need to be empathetic. If you're not empathetic in this business, you can get worn out pretty quick. right?
real fast.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it's awesome. And I'm so happy, and it's refreshing to hear that from a private owner, right? That owns properties, and they're not, we all get into this business and we buy multi-units, obviously, because it's a business. It's whether if it's a way to generate additional income, short-term, long-term retirement, it doesn't matter. But there is a very, very real human element to this as well. And, unfortunately, sometimes people forget about that, but I think it's really important. It's refreshing to hear, you starting with that and saying that, we can't forget that because it's very important.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Cool. So you got your fourplex. You've been kind of, you've gone through your initial landlord, inception or how would you call it? Initiation, I guess I want to.
Yeah.
What were, maybe on that first deal, can you remember any maybe specifics that you would have changed or that you would have done differently? Any kind of lessons learned from that first fourplex?
Yeah, absolutely. One of the first things that I do now when I buy a building is I make sure I get in there chatting to the tenants, and say, hey, I'm Paul, I've taken over, looking forward to working with you. Here's my number, you can call me, you can text me, and just making sure that they know they can contact me. And I think in my exuberance in buying the first property, I was very excited, and I was happy to tell all my friends what I was doing. And hey, I bought a house, tenants, but my tenants didn't really know me, and they really didn't, they didn't really appreciate, I didn't really appreciate the fact that they were there and that they were providing me this money every month. And I didn't, sort of show my face after the initial walkthrough and shaking hands in the initial walkthrough with the former owner. I didn't go down until the next set of checks was due. And I think that was a big mistake. I got off, I was a young guy and maybe I came off a little bit, arrogant or something, to them. And I had to play a little bit of catch up after that and spend a lot more time around the property, whether it was, picking up a little bit of garbage that accumulated, or whether it was shoveling off the steps, or whatever the case may be. You have to be active in and around your properties. You got to make sure that people know it's important to you, because if it's important to me, then, they're, by extension, hopefully they're going to, to take care of the place and feel responsible for it.
Absolutely. Great point. We do the same every time we take over a new property within the management business. Myself and my partner, Steve, to this day, doesn't matter if it's a duplex or it's a new, 50-unit building, we go knocking door to door. And we face-to-face to these tenants, and we provide them, these nice welcome letters that gives them all the contact information, how to reach us, how to pay their rents, and just to reassure them that, that they have somebody there now that they can call 24/7. And it's always good to put a face, to the company that they're going to be dealing with. It really kind of sets them at ease, because if the tenants find out, especially the smaller units, they may get worried that something's going to change or their rents are going to go up, or it's kind of this unknown fear, right? So by going face to face, and it's like, don't worry, nothing's going to change. Hopefully the service will be better with us. Come into the office, call us, and, kind of going through all those details.
Yeah. No. So that was definitely a takeaway from my first building.
Perfect. Cool. So what was next?
Yeah, good question.
You got the first one.
I did.
We can't stop at one. You get one. It's like, okay. I remember after the first deal, like, okay, this one's closed. Where's the next one?
Yeah. Well, perhaps again, sort of against the grain a little bit. I went into a little bit of a hibernation for probably, I think, 5 years, almost, to the month.
Really? Okay.
I basically just kept that place as it was, and I think perhaps youthful ignorance. I didn't necessarily have some financial systems set up where, you know, I was working towards that next property. It was like, hey, great, there's a you know, a couple $100 here a month, or, you know, a little bit more. It wasn't so much let's put it into a fund to go towards the next place, or it wasn't let's put it against the principal to build the equity. So much. It was just kind of this cool thing that I did, and then all of a sudden I sort of realized I should get another one. And so finally I made that conscious decision to be responsible, you know, fiscally with the place, and introduced a much better system of accounting and keeping track of things, and putting some money away for, you know, a slush fund for, you know, against the principal, and all those sorts of things. And so about 5 years later, I got my second property, and that property was a duplex in town. And the duplex was it's a beautiful old duplex. It was owned by an elderly lady, and she happened to pass away, unfortunately. And she lived only in one side of the duplex, and the other side literally had been vacant for probably 20 years. So it was an absolute mess, and it was a demo right down to the studs, and a build back up in absolutely every way. I knew that going in.
Okay, good.
Yeah, I certainly knew that. It wasn't news to me per se, but everything from, you know, the wiring, the plumbing, a new furnace, everything is brand new in that building on the one half of the duplex, and we built it back up. It's a lovely home. There's a great, actually my accountant lives there now, rent.
Sweet.
So she does, yeah, it's great. She does my books, and
so no fudging the rents with her.
No. Well, yeah, I've got to be on the ball there.
Nice. Awesome.
Yeah. So I got that place sorted, and that's when the proverbial bug hit. And, you know, I knew that this was something I really wanted to do. And my next purchase, again, interestingly, came from a colleague who was selling a place, a triplex, a little bit, about just under an hour from where I live. But it, you know, rural location, very good asking price. Again, no real negotiation. It was a good deal. And just pulled the trigger on it. And I still have that property, still have the duplex. And then my most recent purchase was, it was actually a really unique situation. It was a bank-owned triplex in town. This one, there was some serious negotiation back and forth, and I eventually got the place for a very good price. It needed a lot of work. Put a lot of you know, time and effort and money into getting it up to snuff. But perhaps the kicker was that it was actually zoned incorrectly. So it was zoned for a commercial property, because, you know, back in the day it used to be a store of some sort. So it wasn't actually legally zoned to be a triplex. So I had to go through the zoning process. Yeah, so I went. Windsor's not a big town, if it's 4,000 people or something, but it still took about 7 months to get it zoned properly. And all the while, I had bought the place on a credit line. You know, because the bank, of course, isn't going to mortgage it because it wasn't zoned correctly. So that was a unique situation to be going through. But hey, it's all, you know, it's in the bank now. I know, in terms of I know how it works, and I learned a lot, and how to make a presentation to council and those sorts of things. So it was a really interesting process.
Awesome. So, a question about the second one, the duplex you bought. So you had to renovate that whole side, the other unit. So maybe talk a little about how the financing worked with that. I'd love to hear that in terms of you buy the duplex, you're probably going to get a traditional mortgage or not. And then how did you finance the whole rentals? I'm assuming that was a big project. And how did you?
It was a big project.
And how did you pull the money? Did you refinance? Kind of go through that.
Yeah, sure. So again, it was in rough shape. So the purchase price was, you know, fairly low. And so I came up with the 20% down, and got some help from dad. It was a perfect situation. He was willing to help out. And we're going to hopefully work together again on a project soon. But got that done. And then what I set up with the bank is a construction mortgage.
Okay. That's what I thought.
Yeah. So they knew that what I wanted to do. So basically what happens is they release money to you in increments after certain goals are met along the construction road, so to speak. So I went in, I had to get a full set of plans in terms of what was going to be done, which was actually pretty straightforward because it was everything. So, it was just a gigantic quote of all the different things that needed to be done. And then the bank would send somebody along periodically and say, yeah, okay, here's your next installment of
release funds.
Yeah, exactly. So then the final appraised value was, I was really pleased with the final appraised value. Granted, I spent a lot of money on it, but the appraised value was significantly high. And in fact, it, when I did the final refinance, for lack of a better term, it was kind of covered everything off, and it's easily covered by the rents. So it's a nice cash flowing property now.
That's awesome. That's great.
Yeah.
Would you categorize that as was it complicated? Was it complex? Was it hard for you to kind of go through all that, just being on your second one? I've never gone through that kind of construction loan and kind of a complete rehab like that. So,
right. It was, I didn't necessarily find it complicated, Tony, but it's one of those things where you got to just stick with it.
Yeah.
I found that a lot in school, and I mean, I teach now, and I find that a lot with kids. And I say, listen, just stick with it. You'll get it eventually. Don't give up on it just yet. And I found that process. I found the rezoning process very similar. There's days when you just sort of slap your head and think, oh, this could be so much easier. But if you just sort of keep going and pick away at it and do a little bit, each day, then, it really wasn't too bad. There weren't too many days when I wanted to pull my hair out. There were certainly a few for sure. Yeah. But, honestly, I really wouldn't say that it was complicated. I would say that it required commitment, and a little bit of patience perhaps, and just willingness, to come back to the humanistic side of it, just a willingness to get into the bank and sit down with them and say, well, what is it exactly that you do need? And know that there's going to be a few hours a week where you got to go sit in a meeting, or where you got to talk to your contractor, and stay on top of things that way. So I now know that there's a lot of people that don't want to do that, they're not willing to do that. To me, I see it as something that is just a worthwhile investment, for my long-term financial planning.
Absolutely. You bring up an interesting point. The banks obviously play a huge role in a real estate investor's journey, right? So we all know that. And I'll never forget, through my studies, I don't know if you've ever done any education with RAIN, the real estate investor.
Yeah.
So Mr. Campbell is a big advocate of the real estate binder.
Yes.
So it's basically building out a proper binder of information, so that when you go to a bank and you're applying for a multi-unit, that it is stacked with every detail that they could ever ask for. And for any of you guys that are going to be watching this video or listening to this, I would strongly recommend going and getting some details, and I'll post a link wherever this video appears to get more information on that binder. But my first experience it wasn't on our first unit, but my partner and I were going to buy 2 fourplexes, and I just read, I can't remember the name of the book, but the RAIN book, and they talked about the binder, and they go into great detail, and I put it together, very diligently, put a lot of work into it. Went into the bank, we sat down with the banker, presented it to him, and I'll never forget, I think I saved the email. Within an hour or two later, he sent me an email, and he said, guys, I've never ever had that happen to me before. I've never seen investors so put together, such in a professional manner. Like, and we had the approval the next day. He's like, this is a it's a no brainer. So going kind of above and beyond, and really approaching your banks in a professional manner is a huge benefit as an investor, because they're just going to help you get your deals, right? Who doesn't want that?
Totally. And it's funny you brought that up over the Christmas holiday. I was reading that book again for a second time. Yeah. And, I had never put together the binder. I have a few properties, but I had never put it together. And I said, you know what? I've got some time right now. I'm putting it together. So it took 3 hours. Yeah. It was about 3, maybe 4 hours, to collate everything, to do a net worth sheet, to get your, notices of assessment, the T1 generals from the past few years. Yep. But I put it together, and then I met with a new mortgage broker who I'd never worked with. And I met with her for about 2 hours, and it was the same reaction. I passed her. She said, I'm going to need some information from you. And I said, well, I might have what you need. And I just put it in front of her. Yeah. And she's wonderful to begin with. But, I certainly like to think that binder has, pushed me to be someone that she's keen to work with. And she's pretty awesome to reply to my emails right away. That sort of thing.
I've worked with so many different brokers and real estate agents in the years that we've been into this. And the biggest pain in the arse for these people is chasing people for information. It slows everything down. So, we're a big advocate of that in the office, about trying to make everybody's lives easier, because they're going to want to work with you more. I tell that to my leasing agent every day. I'm like, make the girls' lives at the office easy when you bring in applications, when you bring in deposits. Don't make them, chase stuff around, and they'll love you for it, right? And they'll treat you like gold. And I think it's the same type of relationship with a banker or a broker.
Absolutely, you nailed that one. It's just people love it when others make their life easy.
Yeah, absolutely. It makes you want to work with them.
Exactly.
Yeah, exactly. No, that's cool. It's good to hear. So you got a 4, 2 2s, and a triplex today.
I got a 4, 2 tries, and 1 duplex.
Okay.
Yeah. Although last week, actually not since we've agreed to do this, but what's today? Friday. Last Wednesday, the original building that I bought, my 4-unit, actually burned down. Yeah.
To the ground?
They're not. Well, they're demolishing it today. Yeah, they're knocking it completely down. Yeah, nobody was hurt, thank God. But they're knocking it down. So it's I'm in a really unique situation right now where I'm dealing with the whole insurance claim and going through that process right now.
So what happened?
They have deemed it to be an electrical short. Somewhere near the panel in the basement. And, it was an older building, probably pushing 90 years old, I think. And it went up, real quick. And everybody got out amazingly. It was the middle of the night. It was 1 a.m. or something. And by the time I finally got contacted, I think it was 5:30 or something. And I drove down, and it just looked like a movie, there was fire trucks. It was crazy.
I wish I could say that I haven't been there, but we've had 3 fires, I think, in the last 2 years.
Wow.
Yeah. Wow. We had a 54-unit building, 4-story. The fire started on the 2nd floor, and it was like a triangle. So the fire from the 2nd floor went up to the 3rd. The fire extinguisher went off on the 3rd floor apartment. And of course, if you've ever been involved with a flood or a fire extinguisher is going off, it's usually what happens is everything below it is done.
Yeah.
There is so much water that comes out of these things. And I think it was going for probably a half hour, 45 minutes. So we had 18 units that we had to gut.
Wow.
Yeah, it was.
Wow.
and this was a building full of people with special needs. So we had
wow.
like wheelchair, people blind, like you name it. So it was chaos.
Wow.
But we got through it, thank God. And nobody was hurt.
Yeah.
The important
That's
part.
key.
Yeah. So what's kind of next on your radar? Where are you? So if I'm understanding correctly, I'd probably categorize you as a buy and hold. You're buying stuff and you're kind of accumulating units as you go. Flipping doesn't kind of seem to be the core strategy.
Definitely not the core strategy. You know, as a lot of literature says, it's sort of, you know, find a niche and get good at it. And I like the little niche that I'm in. I like rural. You know, it's rural areas. Of course, you're not going to see the appreciation that Halifax sees in the actual house value, but you know, there's over the long term, there's still appreciation. So, you know, when you couple that with the short-term cash flow, the monthly cash flow, to me, it's just a great way to build your equity, to build your net worth, and you know, and to keep going. So, that's definitely buy and hold is the strategy for now.
Yeah, we're kind of along the same lines. I did a flip once about 6 years ago, and I told myself I'll never put myself through that again.
Really?
It wasn't a great experience. I loved I'm a big fan of before and afters. So I love going into something that's like really bad and making it look beautiful.
Yep.
But it was painful on the financial part of things. So I don't think we'll be getting into that in the near future anyway.
Fair enough.
So do you see yourself getting into a different category of size of a building, or do you want to stay in the smaller size units?
It's a great question. I've really been toying around with jumping, you know, quote unquote, into the next level in terms of number of units. You know, whether that's somewhere around 8 to 12, even up to 20, 24, somewhere around there. So definitely toying with that idea right now. In fact, today, hopefully, I'm going to hear a little bit more about the very smallest end of commercial, being a 5-unit building here in Windsor, that I'm hoping to get. So that's been in the works for a little while, just some back and forth. I'm actually, you know, trying a kind of a unique approach to acquiring that building. So I'm just seeing if it's going to pan out for me. Awesome.
Yeah, typically I see with a lot of people, you know, most of us start with duplexes, triplexes, fourplexes. I'm a huge fan of 4 units for some reason. I'm not crazy about single family or duplexes just because of the risk factor. I find that, you know, you're out one rent and you're out of pocket. You're basically, there's not enough leverage. A 4 unit is, you know, if I look at our market, Moncton, I can probably buy a pretty good 4 unit for around 200,000. So, you know, if I'm putting, you know, 20% down, it's only around $50,000 down to get it. I can afford to have a vacancy if I'm faced with that.
Right.
The rent, you know, the expenses should still be covered by the rents that are coming in, the income, as long as you bought it properly with the right numbers. So 4 units is always, and I find also they're easy to get into, but they're also easy to liquidate because there's a lot of people. There's a bigger market for a 4-plex than there is a 12, 24 or up, right?
Exactly.
The availability of investors that are at that level usually diminish.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, for sure. And that's, you know, I think that's why I like the smaller number. You know, when I was younger, or, you know, in university, you know, I lived in a couple of bigger buildings. And I just didn't enjoy the experience personally, and I think that's probably reflects a little bit on my buying habits and patterns in terms of the buy and hold. And you just made that's an awesome point in terms of in terms of resale. The number of investors that are actually looking at 4 units is, you know, got to be 10 times the number that are looking at 12 to 24 unit places for sure.
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah.
So you're planning on mostly within your area, right? You're kind of sticking to local. I think we talked before, you do work with a property manager with another location?
I have, excuse me, I have, no, to be honest, I do manage all of my units right
Okay.
now.
Okay.
Having said that, one of my short-term goals in the next 2 years is I do actually want to incorporate and start my own management company, except hire somebody to do the management of the properties themselves.
Yep.
As you know, I don't need to tell you, Tony, with 1,500 doors under your care is it's time consuming. And when your mindset is on the growth of your investment portfolio, sometimes answering all those texts and phone calls and messages can be distracting from the actual business growth side. So I do have a short-term goal to, although it's going to be a little bit of a knockdown in terms of the net takeaway each month. To me, it's an investment in the future. Again, being able to spend more time researching and running the numbers. That's always a fun thing to do, as you've alluded to.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it's good. I find that there's a huge demand for what I would categorize as good property managers in the market.
Totally.
Unfortunately, there's still some stigma on landlords and property managers in the general public, which I can't stand. And it's been my life mission, I think, to try to correct that and really up the ante in terms of what property managers are doing out there, the professionalism involved in our industry, and the transparency, the honesty involved. It has to go up. So, from dealing with you, that makes me feel good that somebody of your stature and your beliefs would kind of get into this business, because we need more people like that.
Yeah. Well, yeah. And like you said, it's important to it's the tenant's home, and, to think only about the business side of it, the pad my pockets side of the business, then you're obviously in it for the wrong reason. And yes, I'm in it to make money. Don't get me wrong. Of course I am, or else why would I ever do it? But I'm certainly very cognizant of the fact that I'm dealing with the homes of 12 families right now. So, well, I suppose 8 actually, since the fire, unfortunately. But so I just keep that in the back of my head, and if and when I get this management company up and running, then that'll be one of the core beliefs of that company is to treat it as the family home that it is. Yeah, no, that's great. I love it. So, kind of, what would you say, and kind of everything that we've discussed this afternoon, what would you say? What would you kind of give some advice for some new investors? Kind of some things that you've learned that you would try to pass along to a new investor looking to get into properties, or even looking to get a second or third property? Do you kind of any general tips that you could kind of give out there? Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think one of the some of the people I work with here at the school, I actually a couple of weeks ago I hosted a little info session on real estate investing, not because I'm some sort of guru or wizard, far from it, but I just wanted to pass on some information, because to me it's such an amazing vessel for financial planning, for wealth management. It's to me, there's nothing better. And whether or not any of those people go forward with the information, to me, is irrelevant. It's just about spreading the idea. But one of the key messages that I passed along to that crew very simply is, you'll learn as you go. If you're the type of person that's concerned enough to be thinking about long-term financial planning, you have the ability, the capability to learn as you go. You don't need to know everything there is to know. You don't need to know the Tenancy Act from back to front. You don't need to know, all of these things, because frankly, it's impossible. Yes. I'm sure you see this every day. There's situations that come up that you just throw your hands up and say, wow, that's one to chat about later. So there's no way to be fully prepared. I see it as, it's for what it is, which is an amazing tool to invest and grow, your long-term finances for you and your family in a way that deals with people.
Yep.
It's to me, that's great. It's one thing to buy some stocks and say, hey, I own some shares in Google or something.
Mhm.
But it's a whole nother thing to be able to say, yeah, I own a building and there's 5 families that live there, and
Yeah.
that's where they call home. That's pretty
Yeah.
cool.
There's still, I got money in stocks and in mutual funds, but there is still something about owning bricks and mortar. There is
Absolutely.
still something to owning. I can get in my car, I can take a drive down different streets in Moncton here, and I
Yeah.
can look at buildings. I remember the other day, I was driving with my kids and we passed by, I have one of my signs in front of one of my buildings, and I'm like, oh guys, that's one of Daddy's buildings.
Right.
They're like, that one too? And I'm like, yeah, I want to own the whole city, hopefully someday. But it's, kind of putting it in their ear that young, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
I strongly believe that owning, real estate, specifically multi-unit rental properties,
Mhm.
is the best way for wealth. I think it's the best vehicle that we have. I think everybody should own a multi-unit.
Yep.
That's kind of way that I look at it. The reality is whether if it's Canada or the U.S., we're becoming a renters nation.
Absolutely.
The population is aging at a rapid pace, and there's all sorts of stuff going around Facebook and online lately about New Brunswick and the province and what it's going to look like 10 years from now, because 30% more of the population will be in that age category, that the whole baby boomers, right?
Right.
How much pressure they're going to put on the financial services of the country and the government. So we're going to need to rely on ourselves to build these our own wealth vehicles, I think, for later on down the road. And there's going to be just more and more people out there that need apartments. We all need housing. We can never run away from that, right? So
Exactly.
why not own a piece of it, in my opinion?
Yep. No, for sure. And one of my favorite things that I like to share with anyone who will listen to me talk about real estate, which I do fairly regularly, is people will say, well, don't you get worried when the house prices go down or houses aren't selling very fast in Windsor, which they don't. But I say, no, I'm not worried, because who cares? People still need the place to live. They're still going to pay for that place to live, whether you're paying a mortgage or paying a rent is it's the same difference in many ways. So am I worried about, a few years where the housing market's flat and a home's not appreciating? Well, no, because, my long-term outlook is that I'm going to own it for another 20, 30 years. Eventually it's going to go up. And in the meantime, I'm still getting paid every month, to the point where I'm cash flowing positively. So.
Amen. Absolutely. It's right on the nail. And buying apartment buildings, the value of a building is it's not as much as tied to the market as it is to the income that the property generates.
Exactly.
So as long as you're generating income, that's how people buy apartment buildings. So you're not always at the mercy of of the market, whether if it's going up or down. So
yeah,
great
definitely.
Great point, Paul. Okay, perfect. So how does anyone get in touch with you in case they get any questions? I don't know, maybe if you have a Twitter handle or a Facebook page or something like that. I don't know if you wanted to share anything out there.
Yeah, well, as I said to you before we started, I inadvertently logged into this really cool chat thing with I run a summer camp, so that's my summer camp handle. So if anybody wants to check out my summer camp I run here in Windsor, you can contact me through there.
Cool.
And otherwise, I don't have my own real estate investing website as yet, although to be honest, it's something I would like to do. So I just have personal Facebook page and email and that sort of thing.
Perfect. I'll make sure that I post something when we put this video out in the marketplace. So if they want to reach out to you,
yeah, absolutely.
Paul, it's been an absolute pleasure to have you. It's always fascinating, and I love hearing stories of how people get into it, and kind of where they're going in real estate. I really appreciate your time, and I'm sure we'll be chatting again in the very near future.
Yeah, of course. Well, thanks a lot for having me, Tony. Really appreciate it. And like you said, it's just a ton of fun to talk shop sometimes.
Awesome. All right,
Very
man.
cool.
Thanks,
Thanks,
Paul.
Tony.
Appreciate it. Okay.
Okay,
Take
cheers.
care.
Bye bye.
Hey, Paul, it's Tony. Hey, good, good. What'd you think? It's good? Yeah? Sweet, man. Was she watching? Okay. Sweet. I think there's going to be a little bit of delay. You need like a really strong internet connection for this stuff to really kind of